grade 10s. So today we're going to look at some of the patterns in the periodic table. So that just means that we're going to look at the arrangement of the periodic table and why certain elements are grouped the way that we are. So the arrangement of the elements on the periodic table is really useful because it helps to explain and to predict the different physical and chemical properties that each of the elements has. So there are terms that we give to how the periodic table is organized. So instead of saying a row of elements, we call it a period of elements. So it's going from left to right on the periodic table. And then instead of calling it a column of elements, we call them a group. So the elements that have similar properties are grouped together going from top to bottom. So here's just an example of a periodic table of the elements, and you can see the different groups are in color coordinated. So the first group here, group 1, those are the alkali metals, and then right next to them, group 2, are the alkaline earth metals. In the middle here, we have the transition metals. Right here in purple, kind of looks like a staircase. That is the group called the metalloids. And everything to the right of the metalloids are non-metals. And this group here, the second to last, group 17, those are the halogens. And then the very last group, group 18, those are the noble gases. So we'll just go through some of the main properties of each of those chemical families. So the alkali metals in group 1 are very shiny, silvery metals. They are very highly reactive, and that's because they only have one valence electron. So they have one electron in that outer shell. That gives them a charge of +1 when they form ions, and they will oftentimes bond with halogens, and that's because the halogens tend to want to give away, accept one electron. Next we have the alkaline earth metals, so the group 2, the next group over. These metals are very shiny, silvery metals as well, but they're not quite as reactive as the alkali metals. And that's because they have 2 electrons in that outer shell. So when they form ions, they will tend to have a charge of +2. So they like to give away their electrons. Okay, so the next group are the transition metals. So these are the metals that are in the middle of the periodic table. So they'll have slightly different properties than the alkali and the alkaline earth metals. They still are metals, but they're not quite as reactive, and they will often have more than one possible charge. Still a positive charge, but their valence can differ. Then we have the metalloids, which again is that staircase. So on the periodic table that I showed you, it was the purple elements. And this basically is our separation point on the periodic table. So all of the metals are on the left side, and all of the nonmetals are on the right side of that staircase. And these elements that are on the staircase are considered metalloids because they will have properties of both metals and nonmetals. So they're kind of in between there. Okay, so then on the right side of that periodic table, to the right of that staircase, we have our nonmetals. And these elements tend to be very hard, brittle, dull. They do not have the same characteristics as metals at all. And they also tend to have negative charges, so they like to accept electrons when they form ions, which we'll talk about later. The halogens are a group of nonmetals, so group 17. These are very highly reactive nonmetals, and they tend to be quite poisonous in their atomic state. And they will also like to accept an electron, so they usually have a charge of -1. And that's because as a neutral atom, they have 7 electrons in their outer shell, and so they like to just take one more to fill that up. And then the noble gases, group 18, very, very stable. Their outer shell of electrons is full, so they do not form compounds. They're happy just how they are. So that's basically it for chemical families. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of their properties. So talk to you soon.